to talk about this in a little different way than you normally think about. So I'm basing this on, like Stuart said, I've been doing this for about 25 plus years. I've been in project management for longer. So it's been a long time that I've been working in this space. And I see a lot of similarities across all the organizations. And that's one of the things I want to kind of talk about. So approaching this from a kind of different standpoint than we in PMO normally do. So I want to talk a little bit about the state of the PMO. What is SPM, from my opinion? What are the different capabilities and what are the different components? Again, from my opinion, on what we're going to talk about with that. So over the years, what we've seen is there's a number of P's and a number of M's. And in fact, I used to actually have a primer that went around and talked about what kind of PMO are we going to build. So I was in management consulting for years. I was on a global basis. I lived in Europe for, a long time, about 15 years. I worked at Vodafone. I worked at the different big companies out there. I worked at Chevron. I stood up their PMO. I stood up the PMO in a number of Silicon Valley groups, which was a very interesting experience, one I don't want to repeat. Just kidding. And then the last few years, I've moved into retail, especially around the food space. And so was at Walmart. So the size of Walmart is amazing. And, now I'm still in some areas around food and food distribution and supply chain and that type of thing. And what I see is consistently, we have the same issues kind of across. And so PMOs, what are PMOs? P's are the portfolio, program, project, product. We added that one in, recently. Are we supportive? Are we collaborative? Are we monitoring? Are we managing? Are we executing? Are we delivering? Are we stewards? It's just kind of gone around and around with kind of confusion about what is a PMO, or even if that we want to use that word anymore. Now it's strategic, we have strategic portfolio management. So we've added a different, initial going in. So I thought to throw this up. This is really, speaking of geeky, this is totally geeky. This is a timeline of PMOs. And I did this because this was really interesting to me, is PMOs from the standpoint of a project management office, essentially, started in the 30s. And it went through, and it was part of the military, and it was helping them design airplanes and different things in the military. And it went through that way until about the 80s. And then in the 1980s, it moved into construction and other big areas where we could really leverage the management with using cross-functional, same budget, same resources, those types of things in large-scale projects such as construction. So all that made sense. So for like decades, this is really focused on delivering and executing on projects. Then we went through a really fun experience. This is when I really got to work with Donna Fitzgerald, by the way. I'm going to be a featured speaker at Gartner in Prague, and that was really exciting. That was in the 90s. Now I'm really aging myself. And we started adding things. That's when we started looking at things like prioritization, right? The first PPM tools started coming out, and we kind of expanded, and we started growing, and suddenly we were important and relevant in organizations at the C-level, at leadership level. Then we had kind of the aughts. I call them the aughts. I think things kind of changed during that period. We did not keep up in terms of PMOs. We did not keep up in terms of showcasing the value of what we had to offer. We did not keep up in terms of the different types of work. Everything was this, project management. It had to follow a certain thing, 9,000 templates, 9,000, plans, and different formats of different things. And we suddenly became the big brother. We were stopping things from happening. We weren't agile, we weren't adaptive, and we weren't moving fast. And so people started getting rid of this. And project management kind of went into a different direction. And so I've seen in the last few years that has now kind of resurfaced. And where we're moving to now is bringing back some of the project management capabilities, as well as enhancing some of the PMO portfolio capabilities, because companies really started realizing how much they had to have this stuff. So that's what I'm seeing. That's my personal experience, what I'm seeing out in the marketplace today. And so we have to be really aware of all the different types of projects, programs, products, agile, lean, whatever it is that creates the environment for the organization is where we should be really focused across all of them. And I think about Tupperware. Tupperware just went out of business. Okay, they went bankrupt. Tupperware was the #1 seller of this great new product that came out. For years and years and years, you had Tupperware parties, and you would go do that. The reason they went out of business is they wouldn't go digital. Okay, they wouldn't go into e-commerce. They said they would not change their business model, and they went out of business. And it just kind of makes me think a lot that we kind of got into that space, and now we're pulling ourselves out of it, if you will. So I'll try not to be so geeky going forward.
Actually, I love your timeline there. I did one of these webinars a year or two ago with a guy called Atif Ansar, Dr. Atif Ansar, who at the time was running the Masters in Major Program Management at Oxford University. And his timeline went back to Roman times, where documentation of failed projects and mega projects that had failed and all these things. It's hysterical. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
That's okay. That's when they were chipping them on rocks, okay? So where are we going and why do we want to go there? So as organizations, PMOs, we need to be providing value. We need to be showcasing value. Value is my #1 word. I'm going to use it over and over and over. I got a number of people on my team here. They're so sick of me saying value. They want to, kind of hang up on me all the time. So it's all about delivering value. All right. If we're not doing that, we're not moving the strategy forward. We're not moving the company forward. We're not executing on projects appropriately. We may be delivering, but we're not executing. And we're not creating the overall enterprise value that we need to do for the organization. And so this is the types of things that I think we need to be really thinking about as we set up an SPM. So according to Gartner, by 2025, 75% of all value measures will be based on strategic business value, not on project execution. And this is a real shift from what I was showing you on the timeline. It's how we start moving ourselves away from just thinking about delivery and execution, triple constraints. I mean, are we really still talking about that? Those types of things are really starting to be important. They also advise, Gartner does, to modernize the use of enabling technologies. So introducing new technologies for portfolio management and execution that promote strategic portfolio management, decision-making, and project and work execution. So I think if you're interested in some of these tools, you can talk to Stuart. He's probably pretty familiar with them. But there's mechanisms and tools that can help us to put this all together into a package. And so we're really focused on challenged from our stagnating PMOs that have relied on the original premise. This is a quote from McKinsey, and purpose. And we must evolve to be proactive as a strategic organization, enabling value contributions through aligned investment and adaptive continuous delivery. And I think that's really the key. So we need to move to a new mindset, and we need to be understanding how that enables the organization to successfully navigate through all the project noise that goes on and deliver exactly what we should be delivering. So what is strategic portfolio management? It's a strategy. What is strategy? So I actually worked at some companies where I was a consultant that they didn't have strategy. They didn't believe in strategy. They were tech companies. We don't need strategy. It's all going to change in 6 months. So we don't need strategy. So I found that to be a very interesting concept. And most of those companies have not kept up with delivering high value products, going forward. Some of them are still struggling now because they depended on ways that they had been doing things in the past, or this new agile, they were moving so fast. But anyway, strategy is a general direction for the company and its various components for a desired future state. The strategy results come from detailed strategic planning. So that's kind of it.
So Deborah, let me jump in for a second there.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. When you go to conferences or you're networking with your peers, right, what's the general level of understanding of what strategy is and how it works amongst PMOs? I'm interested because I have a view. I'd be interested in your view.
My opinion is very few people across the board understand what strategy is. I think it's a concept that seems to be very clear and is very hard to understand, especially how you implement it. So I think PMOs are still struggling to how you align that strategy with their delivery. But I really think this is an area we struggle with a lot in terms of companies.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I don't think it's just PMOs, by the way. There was some recent research that talked about something like 92% of people in a typical organization simply don't understand the strategy of the organization. So if that's true, how can you execute the strategy? You can't.
No, you
might as well not have a strategy, right?
Sitting in a drawer somewhere, usually. So because of that, what does the strategy identify, right? Goals and priorities leveraging our finite resources to execute. And I think it's really important that we start understanding how resources and capabilities really align to how to execute on strategy. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in another slide. So what is exactly SPM? It's the bridge between strategy and execution. And it ensures that the individual initiatives are online to deliver those goals. I found this old picture. That's when I used it because I liked it. So on the left is all of our strategic business stuff. You know, what's our mission and vision? I wager, Stuart, to your point, most people wouldn't even be able to tell us their company mission and vision, let alone the strategies, unless they're very highly communicated. And then you get, this high level strategy. So they're still not clear how that translates to them, right? And so here's our capabilities. What's our business capabilities? And then over on this is an IT picture, right? So over here would be how the IT team is building out the delivery and execution. And this is where strategic portfolio management sits. We sit in between the intersection of strategy and execution, and that's very important. We do not sit on the execution side. We are not delivering projects. We are delivering strategic value. And that's a very, very important distinction.
Can you say that again? Because that is really, really important. Just say it again.
We are not sitting on the execution side because we're delivering strategic value, not executing on projects.
So those of you who know Laura Barnard, so again, Laura's a good friend of mine, and Laura talks about something called that she calls the strategy execution gap. Right, so this is where the vast majority of PMOs spend 80% of their time on execution issues and 20% of their time on the S piece of SPM. And she talks about how at the PMO, at the strategic PMO level, you should be spending 80% of your time on the S part of SPM, and maybe 20% of your time supporting and developing tools and capabilities to support the PMs who are executing stuff. So it sounds like you're very much aligned with that kind of story.
I think so. I think I would be aligned with that. Yeah. And then this is just kind of an overall. Just SPM is the business capabilities, processes, and supporting tools that create a portfolio of assets focused on moving the strategy forward. So that's what we're creating out of all of this. So that's my interpretation of SPM. So what are some of the capabilities that go along with this? We'll be talking about capabilities a lot, because one of the things that I think we tend to use kind of as an oversight, capabilities are the cross abilities within an organization. So it's behaviors, processes, knowledge, talent, whatever it is that brings the organization together and develops a series of capabilities to work in the company. So it's not just, we focus a lot on, say, things like resource. How many resources do we have? Well, capabilities are looking at a bigger talent pool and a bigger organizational structures. Where are our people? Are they fungible? Do we have the right skill sets? Do we have soft skills? That would be a capability versus just kind of the general thing that we focus on. So it's broadening our awareness of what's going on in the organization. So to develop an SPM, you need to have the ability to break down and communicate business strategies. So to your point, Stuart, this is one of the things that we really, really need to focus on, because we have to connect all the work we do to the strategies. And if people down on the software engineer doesn't understand that, how I move in the strategy, and they don't have to understand how I move in the strategy. They just have to understand that what I do is helping to build these products that are doing this, and we'll eventually get there. It's an awareness all the way up and down, and we really stop looking at strategy and rolling out our strategies at kind of a high level. So we might have our little picture or strategic pillars or things that kind of come out like that and describe that, and we send it out to everybody and they look at it in all hands. They go, okay, that's great. But we don't help them understand how to integrate what they're doing on a daily basis into that.
And to give you an idea, so actually Ashok was playing devil's advocate there and saying, "Oh, come on, does everybody really need to understand the strategy?" And I would say yes, right? Absolutely, they do. And so he kind of threw out does the janitor need to understand it? And if you're in a hospital, absolutely, because the janitor keeps everything clean. That reduces the number of infections, which improves medical outcomes. That's the strategic goal of the organization. Now, it's part of the strategic planning process and part of the management thing to be able to cascade down the big mission and vision stuff into exactly what you just said, Deborah, which is, within each team, you need to understand which bit of that do you own, right? How does what you do every day contribute to those strategic goals? And so my advice to everyone on the call would be, go and read whatever strategy documents your company has published. Go and read them. And then go talk to your boss about them and ask your boss how they think your team should be contributing to those goals. And if they don't know, that sounds like it's time to go and have conversations with people, right? And figure it out. Because if you don't know, and we do this internally where, we challenge our software developers, we challenge our QA guys to think about the strategic goals and what they can do in their daily life to help us achieve them, right? So one of ours is to be enterprise ready. Right? That's one of our big themes is to be enterprise ready. And so the QA guys went off and came back with this little plan that changed the way they do testing to make sure that they're testing in the context of an enterprise environment, right? Where you have lots of different users. They're not just testing the functionality, they're now testing it in the context of having lots of users across lots of different parts of the organization, because that's what an enterprise is. Yeah. And so, if you do not understand what your role is and what the contribution you personally can make, go figure it out, because it's so important. And you'll probably enjoy your job more if you understand how you fit into the delivering value as well, right? That's more fun. Sorry, interrupted again.
It's okay. The other capabilities include moving from annual to continuous planning. We've been talking about, I've actually been at places where we recommended continuous planning and it was a flat out no. Under no circumstance will we do that. So interesting that there's resistance to that, but there is. And again, this is evolving your PMO, not just the SPM, to be thinking about how to implement continuous planning throughout the fiscal year. Lean governance models, okay? Governance, we're going to talk about systemic issues in just a second. Governance, right? To me, it's one of the biggest areas why we fail, if it's not the biggest area why we fail in terms of implementing really good PMO. So we got to be lean though, got to be lean and adaptive and fluid and all those new buzzwords, right? Agile, I'll use that word. But it's about understanding that there's different ways of delivering things, but making it easy for people and understanding things. Winning portfolio, what if analysis. This is part of continuous planning. I get new work. How do I know how it's going to impact things? Most of the time we look at our 2 or 3 criteria and we say, okay, this is going to cost a lot, or it's going to give us a lot, or something like that. And so it's now important. And so we move it in. So we have to be able to really understand how that affects the portfolio of work that's going on. Roadmaps. I hear people talk a lot about roadmaps. I think it's a skill set that organizations can really improve on for the most part, and especially about what we do with them. So, I've seen a lot of roadmaps that, are just long lines. I've seen milestone ones that look like project plans, different things like that. So a portfolio roadmap with your strategic efforts is hard to put together. I would recommend you do that in a workshop. Financial insight against all work. That one's pretty standard, straightforward. Managing outcomes. This is another mindset change, okay? So we're managing outcomes. And that's part of SPM that makes it different than just plain PMO or delivery execution, okay? We're not just delivering, we're delivering outcomes. And that's part of the mindset change that I recommend we start really thinking about as we move through implementing SPM. So I made up my components here, and we're going to talk about each one of these. And why did I pick these? Well, I'll tell you why. Because in multiple decades, these are what they see consistently being repeated and causing us to fail as an organization, being PMO. So the first one is kind of new. This is what I haven't seen so much, but that the strategic imperatives are not what's driving execution and delivery. So we use words. This is a place where we use words. Let's see. I've had compliance, omni, transformation. Hey, remember when SOX was a criteria for what we did work on. Now we have digital. We have whatever it is that's the buzzword of the day. So strategy is the new buzzword, and so we have to be very careful we don't fall into, hey, this is everything we do is strategic. No, it's not. And it shouldn't be done if it's not. But what we don't do is drive our execution of our other projects. So say, digital is really important. Okay, so everything digital gets done no matter what. Check, check, check. All right, and now we have 400 projects in the digital space. That's not how you leverage your strategy going forward. It's to understand when that should be done and how you can do it. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Culture, I put this on here. I think it's super, 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 super important. Culture is the perceived value of PMO up and down the organization. We have too many delivery mechanisms and we need a mindset change. So I don't want to just sell this and have all the executives come back and say, woohoo, that's so great. Of course I want to have that. Can't tell you how many times I've heard that. And then they got rid of the PMO because we were making them accountable and we were prioritizing their work. And suddenly it was like, no, I don't really want that. I want to be able to do what I want to do. So really showcasing the value to the organization so there's buy-in at all levels. Lack of governance. Okay. We are expecting our leaders and our portfolio committees to make decisions. We need to provide them with the adequate information to do it, but they must make decisions. So if we have too much work to deliver, then they need to stop work. And this is really, really, really hard in most of these organizations. So I would put some massive amount of time in culture and governance. Those are 2 places that I would be spending when I start setting this up, be spending time. Let's not worry about all the processes and templates. We'll get there. We've got 100 million of them. It's not a problem.
And this is a really right. So you've got the old adage that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? Drucker and all those guys. So yeah, we all know this is important. And you said put effort in there, but how do you do that? How do you engage in the conversation with the leadership that says, guys, the culture's broken around this stuff. Fix it. That's a tough conversation, right?
Yeah, it's a tough conversation. And again, what has happened, and I think most of us know that, is that we started being big brothers. We started throwing process at the issue instead of throwing communication and change management and showcasing the value. So we started that. And so now we've kind of got to back up and break down those barriers and start showing them, okay, if I ask you to stop this work, let me tell you how that's going to help you and what that means. And, if we have this, we're going to put it on hold, because this is what we as an organization need, and tie it all together. That's why everybody needs to understand strategy, because if we're going to be making decisions down here at execution, at the initiative level, at the strategic initiative project level, right, then if we can't do that, if they don't understand why we're making those changes, it's because we haven't shown them this linkage to the company. What does that mean? If we don't make strategy, we lose jobs. Okay, it's not a small issue if we don't deliver on some of these things. And you've seen it. We just went through this huge layoff out here in California. I mean, it was horrible to watch. And a lot of it is because these companies weren't delivering. So that's where you put your effort. You have meetings. You don't go like the speed of light. I had this on a slide. We'll talk about that just a little bit, but that's what, slow down. Okay, get the buy-in. Okay, so right now we're building out a PMO. Okay, an SPM PMO, and we've already recommended we're going to present this tomorrow morning, and we're not fully launching until January. Okay, so we have everything in place. We've got the tools, the processes, but we know it's going to take us that long to get the communication out. So let's not shoot ourselves in the foot. This is another one. Execution of work. We assume that it equates to delivering strategic value. It does not. So this is a really hard pill to swallow. I had to think about this a lot. So we prioritize work efforts, but we're not really achieving things. We deliver projects, but we don't deliver business value. We don't realize our business value, but we delivered something. So how does that work? Because we're equating delivery to the outcome instead of determining the outcome in the value. So outcome is what we need to be delivering as opposed to our triple constraints. So financials, one of the things I really realize is we have a huge basis on financials from two standpoints. One is we have a huge focus on it. Number two, we have too much focus on it. I think everything is about the financials. Are we funded? Are we this? Do we have the financials? Do you have this? Where's the finance? Where's the finance? Okay, that's one piece. It's one piece of the outcome. It's, do you have your business value stories? Have you completed those? That's a good question, as opposed to looking at kind of your P&L. Wait a minute, do we have enough money for this? So it's kind of changing the mindset around that as well. But also, I think this is an area that organizations really need to beef up, is our financial acumen across the board. So, finance has a lot of secret knowledge. You got all those chartered accountants and CPAs and all that do all this, but we need to be able to understand and build those out as well. So if you're in the PMO, I highly recommend that you get your financial capabilities way up, because you can really use that. And then portfolio reporting. We report a lot on projects. We do not report a lot on portfolio. So strategic planning. So how do you put all this together? So translate strategy. First thing you need to do is have a strategy. Okay. If I don't have a strategy, how am I planning against it? So nowadays these can look very different. Because Chevron, we did a 4 weeks in a conference room and built a 25-year strategy, because we were building drilling platforms in the ocean and things like that, and they took that long. Nowadays it may be a 6-month strategy. If you don't know where you're going as a company, you don't know if you got there, if you got off the exit too soon or whatever, right? So lots of different techniques and mechanisms, and some of the more current ones use here OKRs. An OKR would work fine. It really translates everything down to everybody. We're doing OGSIMs where I'm at now, and we're translating those into HR goals. So the individual's goals for their performance goals will be based against their in the strategies. So there's some mechanisms that we can use to do some of that stuff that makes it better. But you have to really be able to translate that to execution and priorities. I did do this picture. And so the first top parts are the strictly strategy. SPM sits in the middle, and then we execute down at the bottom. But I also added a little box up here about culture and capabilities. So measure vertically and horizontally. We historically really focus on horizontal. Boom, here's our pillars, here's our areas, and that's what we look at. If we're not doing this, we're not developing our organizational capabilities, and we're not looking across the board at the enterprise. So the best way to do that is to start with an enterprise strategy. Get the stuff from the top, get the stuff from the top guy, and start driving it from there across the board. This is very important for enabling organizations. So if it's your HRs, your legals, your finance teams, all these that support organizations, they need to know how they sit in all of those things across the board. Obviously have an intake of work efforts. You do capabilities gap assessment. So this is really about, do we have the financial acumen we need across the board, and really understand that. Let's see where it goes. Prioritization. This is a really interesting one. We just had a conversation yesterday about this. How do you measure or prioritize strategic impact? And that is a very, very interesting concept. So like all the other buzzwords, I'm compliance, yes, I get 5 points on my score. I'm aligned to strategy, yes, that's why I titled this section here, that everything's strategic, because what you will get is 100% yes, it's strategic. That's the answer. Everyone will give you the same exact answer, because to them, whatever they're doing is strategic. So you have to figure out ways to either showcase the measurement, how they will actually be measured, which is very hard if you're doing scored weighted criteria for prioritization, right? Or look at other components. So yesterday, Mike and I were talking about doing different things, customer impact, risk assessments, different things that could lead into moving the strategy forward. So this is an area that would be great for us to have as a discussion point if people wanted to talk about that. But I think it's really going to be hard for us at this point to use this as one of the criteria in prioritization.
And it was interesting. I had a conversation yesterday with a UK government department, and they very proudly said, we've got 6 strategic priorities that are driving this whole department, right? This whole agency. And that's very nice. Glad to hear it, right? That's the big strategy. That's kind of the yellow and the green blobs up at the top somewhere. And it was really interesting because when we got to actually talking about prioritization, right, I said, well, you've got your 6 big objectives. Do they help you prioritize? Not at all. No. Right, because they're too vague. And so to make this happen, right, to make this prioritization happen, you have to be more specific, and you have to break down, you have to go down and ask those hard questions about, okay, for the whole organization, we've got these big goals. How does that apply to the R&D team, or to the IT team, or to the whichever team you're in, right? How do those goals translate into what we do? And then they become your objectives. So this strategy process, this pyramid here, one of the things that I often talk about is this happens, right? This happens at the whole corporate level, but it also happens within each division and within each department, right? The same process needs to happen. And, you can't align your work to what you're trying to achieve if you don't get to a level of specificity where you can actually measure it, right? Where you can actually estimate it. Anyway. Sorry, I'm going to shut up because I could talk about this, as you know, Deborah.
Yeah, I know you could.
So I could talk about this for hours.
Yeah, but Stuart, the other piece about that is then we have to make sure that we're understanding across all of those pieces as they roll up. So that's why some of the new techniques like OKRs, or in our case, we did OGSIMs. And so we can get the bigger pictures in the OGSs, as you will. And then the initiatives are more business unit related. And that seems to be a pretty good technique for that. So road mapping, continuous planning, and stutter we kind of talked about. And then the final one is let's measure short-term and long-term. So when people think strategy, they're thinking, okay, what am I doing in the next 3 years? Okay, long-range planning kind of stuff, right? All right, so we're measuring that. Okay, so you get words like EBITDA, right? Okay, so little Joe down here is like, oh yeah, that relates to me. Doesn't get that. So we want to have some short-term abilities to track that we're trending against the strategy and the values outcomes that we need. So let's not forget that kind of piece. So a lot of these have the same things that we've kind of talked about. So organization culture, make sure that we understand our value and make sure that the people in the organization understand it. Change your mindset. And the final thing, which we didn't really touch on, really is the appetite for change. So organization, I love the whole thing about, we'll never change so much again. Oh, it's just about change. It's like, I don't know for anybody who's been doing this for a while, but the change is the same. It's always been, things are always changing. We've always tried these things. If anybody remembers TQM, that's been going on. They just kind of changed the name. So it's really about being fluid with how to implement some of these newer concepts so that we're addressing people that are now more learned in those areas than maybe what we were. So being flexible around some of that kind of thing. Governance. Again, I hear all the time executives want this, and then they really don't. Kid you not. When it's every time I hear first time somebody said that to me, I was all excited. Then I kind of got, after that, it was kind of like, no, they didn't really want it. I was told yesterday that our CEO made a very large, visible, and succinct set of information at their annual retreat that they just had about prioritization and intake and how we were going to start doing this, and we were going to really look at work. And I was jumping up and down for joy because that was really clear that he understood that we were going to have to cut some work, that we were going to be really focused on this. And he said it to everybody at this big meeting. And that made me very excited because when you have people sitting around the boardroom saying, yes, of course that sounds great, why would they say no? But when it comes to, sorry, but we're not going to have your pet project. We're not going to have your Mr. Big Guy project. We're going to squeaky wheel. We're going to be focused on these things, and stuff that you're already working on, you're going to stop. That has to be said, and it's hard, and people don't want to do it. So for somebody as an executive to come out and say that makes me very happy about how successful we're going to be at this particular PMO setup. So that's that. It's very, very important. Execution, again, we need to move to a value mindset. We need to be focused on outcomes. That's it. Project program management, we already got all that. Benefits and value, again, we've talked about some of that. We had some of this discussion a little earlier, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. Okay, reporting. This is an area that we can really leverage. So especially if we're using tools, right? Any tools, PPM tools or Power BI or whatever the tools are. So, I've seen these status reports, and we're still reporting on stuff, and that's absolutely perfect, okay, for projects, right? What I don't see is portfolio reports much, right? And when I do, it's, different things. So maybe you want to start looking at things like how are we trending against IRR? IRR is our business value mechanism that we're using, right? And you can trend that. You can get one of those great chartered accountants, and they can show you how to do that for your project. They can build that for you so that you're on track for your outcomes on that. But we tend to look at how much did we spend on our capital, or what's our P&L look like, right? Instead of looking at where are we going against our values and our strategies. And it's a huge difference in what we try to report on. So, I just have a couple examples here. This is an executive scorecard, and it's just showing kind of the different areas to think about. So of course, something like percent of portfolio aligned to strategic initiatives. All right, if everybody's a yes, that doesn't mean much, right? But if you really break it down, you're going to know that. Some portfolio PMO kinds of things. How many projects got put on hold? So I remember many, many years ago when we were told if your projects didn't get put on hold, you were not doing effective PMO work. So it always stuck with me, you know. So if we're not putting things on hold or canceling or turning them down, you know, then we're not effectively maturing our PMO capabilities. So, you know, how many business cases, that's fine. Initiatives with this is around the capabilities. What percent of initiatives have skill gaps, shortages? You know, looking across the board, where are we having skill gaps? You know, not, you know, by resource demand so much. How many initiatives do we have in portfolio lookbacks? You know, you talked about lookbacks, right? So did we go back and really check on some of that? So this is a nice little way of doing this. And then I have pages of this. So these are just some examples, but these are actual kinds of things to think about when you start getting ready to do your dashboards. I know some of them will come out of the tools, right? But some of them are really portfolio, and you know, are we executing in our portfolio against the strategy and delivering the outcomes that we said we would? So if you can keep your mind there, you're going to have a whole different set of metrics and reporting than you traditionally are probably doing right now. And that's pretty much what I had. So, you know, basically slow it down. Don't try to do 900 processes at the same time. Be fluid, understand and communicate the strategy, expand your organizational capabilities, and change your mindset. That's it.
Deborah, I've been really struggling for the last 40 minutes to not interrupt you on every point, on every slide, and have a whole discussion about it. So to give you a little bit of feedback straight away, right? My team are watching this, and Teams has gone insane. They're already copying and pasting content and writing posts and getting really excited about how we can share this with our engineers and all this kind of good stuff. So my guys are quite experienced in this area. They hear me talk about this all the time. So if they're excited by what they've just heard, then everyone on this call should be absolutely jumping up and down in your seats. That was fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I think some of the comments were things around some of the hows, right? So we talked a little bit about how do you start to change the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there's something about how do you, again, there was a little discussion going on about how do you find that sweet spot with the leadership team? Because it's not the leadership's team to be experts in project management or portfolio management. They're there to be the senior leadership team. And it's not project manager's job to be part of the senior leadership team, right? And this is that bridge, I think, that you were talking about at the beginning. Mm-hmm. That's what the SPM is all about, is being that bridge. So what do you think are the sweet spot is where you can be that bridge, right? And pull each of those communities a little bit closer together. But how would you start, speak to your own self 25 years ago, and what advice would you give yourself to get started on that journey, to get better at doing that, engaging both ends? Because a bridge has to connect at both ends, right? So both ends of the bridge. And start pulling them together. What are the key skills you've developed, you think, to get there?
Well, one, you have to understand the business. I think that's really important. And then you also have to understand delivery. So you need to have some background in project management, but not everybody in PMO needs to have a project management background. So how do we manage what's being delivered so that you can talk to people and really understand what it is that they're presenting or providing you in terms of status, so you can have that conversation? And then how do you translate that over to the business needs? So I think that's really how you kind of work on both sides, if that helped.
Yeah.
Those guys are very unclear.
Yep, great. I'll tell you what, I've just noticed that that Alistair is on here today. Alistair, just give me a little wave. Let me know that you're happy for me to unmute you to allow you to talk. I think that's a yes. I see a hand. All right, I'll tell you, I'm gonna allow Alistair to talk. So Alistair's one of my team. A little bit on Alistair's background. So Alistair was reasonably senior in the British Army. He had 800 people in green pajamas running around underneath him or something like that at some point. And he's actually sat in the seat of that senior leadership role, being the guy saying, I want governance and I want this and I want that. Mm-hmm. And so Alistair, I'd be interested in your take on that question, right? When you were in that seat, what did you want the PMO to say and do to help build that bridge?
So this is, oh crikey, this is one of those big questions. And if there was an easy answer, then none of us would be sitting here talking about it, because somebody would have provided the answer and everybody would just be doing it and life would be lovely. The challenge is about communication. It's about talking the right language. What I wanted when I was on the other side of the bridge was for the PMO to tell me in terms that I understood what was going on, what value was being delivered, what was going well, and what I needed to worry about. So that was the comfort blanket of what was going well, and we were on track for this. And what did I need to worry about? Because I could do something to contribute to solving the problem, for putting extra resources in place or providing better direction or something like that. What I didn't want was a massive spreadsheet with lots and lots of color-coded bits and pieces of exactly what the status was of every small piece of activity. Because I'm afraid, my brain is just not big enough to pick that lot up in 5 minutes. What I really wanted them to do was talk in terms that I understood about what I needed to know about quickly and effectively, so I could give good direction and they could crack on. And this is where we're talking about that bridge, that the PMO needs to understand enough about the executive world so that they can say the right things at the right time in the right way, so that the executives understand and they can make the decisions that they're paid to make. And then the PMO can say, thank you very much. I've got your direction. I'm on it. Leave it with me. I now know what you want me to do, and I'm off and away doing it.
And Deborah, your reports that you had there at the end, right? That's really what they were trying to do, right?
To have that level of communication, yes.
Yeah. So the thing that struck me with Deborah's example there at the end was that it wasn't really detailed, right? The execs don't care, right? I'm the CEO of a small company, and even I don't care about the details, right? Because it's just I don't have the expertise to process and understand the detailed information in all the different parts of the organization. So Deborah, what I really liked about your reports, and I'd love you if you can just to dig a little deeper into that, is how do you decide what information is the right information to put into those governance reports? Because it's not going to be the same for every organization you've done this for, right? It's been different for everyone, I would bet.
Well, I think it's actually just, I've carried these reports, I gotta say honestly, I've carried these reports with me for 15 years and just enhanced them as I go along. So when I first started them, yes, it was all about, all the project management reports. And then I started looking at it from different levels. So different people need different information. So kind of what Alistair's talking about, some people do want all that detailed level, right? And so, but then as you go up into different levels, so you might have a project manager, you might have a business owner, you might have an executive, and they all have a different level of information. And then I like to go through the whole so what scenario. This is another way to look at it. So I want to show, I don't know, the amount of resources planned to actuals, okay, that we're using on projects. So at a project level, that's really about, do I have people staffed appropriately? And then keep going through that. And then as I go up higher, I'm going to be showing them that we have skill gaps, we need fungible resources, and those are more, that's why I go back to the systemic piece. That's different ways of handling that is not necessarily by just saying I have enough software engineers or something. It actually comes right out and says we have a big skill gap in this technology. I don't have any full stack engineers. I don't have any machine learning. I need 5 of them, and that's one way to kind of look at it. So it's capabilities. I also don't have anybody who's good at negotiation. I don't have somebody who's good at conflict, so it's making it bigger than just what the skills look like. But that level, that report is going to be very crisp, and say, yes, we have 4 skill set gaps, blah, blah, blah. And then the leadership has decisions to make around that, right?
And that's the key, I think, to a good governance report, is that you're giving them the information they need to understand what's going on, but then you're being very clear about what decisions you're asking them to make to support you, right? That's what jumped out at me when I looked at that, was I could see exactly where you needed help on that thing, and I could get there in about 10 seconds, right? Which was really cool.
Yeah, I like that. Anything that's fast, that's why I like dashboards, lots of visuals. Yeah, some crazy Power BI reports come out, and I look at what did this I did this in my last company, and they give these Power BI reports, and you go, what is this telling me? And I never could figure it out.
And everything in that report, right? I would, yeah, indeed, everything in your report, right? If it's going to the leadership, the higher up in the organization it's going, the more important this becomes. Ask yourself, what is the person receiving this? What decision are they going to make based on this information? And if the answer is they're not, then you could probably, I'm not going to say it's a golden rule that you could take it out, but you could certainly consider taking it out, because the more information you give people, I used to have a Saab. Anybody on the call remember Saab? I used to love it, right? So I had a Saab. My favorite thing on that whole car was you're driving along the highway at night, there was a button, you could press the button and all of the lights went out on the dashboard except for the speedo, right? Which was the only thing you needed when you're driving on the highway at night. So you weren't distracted by radio, by how many revs you're doing, the temperature of the engine. But if the engine got hot, that would light up, right? And that's what your dashboard, I think, should probably do. It should give you the speedometer, because you always need that.
Yeah.
But then it should be highlighting the things that need attention.
And the other thing, if I may, Stuart, just dive in for a second, the other thing that you need to remember about the senior executives, it's a comment I put in the chat, I think, about stepping into their world and understanding them so you can talk to them effectively. Don't fall into the trap of thinking because you've been thinking about this issue for ages and you understand it inside and out that they know as much about it as you do. If you're calling them to a meeting, they're probably reading the notes on it as they walk down the corridor to the meeting room, metaphorically, even if it's an online meeting. You've got to get them up to speed quickly, which means don't give them extraneous information. Give them the important stuff in a way that they can understand and tell them what you want them to do with it. They're bright people, but they can't just absorb masses of data in 30 seconds. Give them the good stuff and help them to help you.
Brilliant. I have one final question, then we're really out of time, which is what does a newly formed PMO need to have in place as a minimum to get started beyond kind of traditional PMO stuff? What do you think is the minimum, the MVP for a PMO?
For an SPM PMO?
Yeah, for one that wants to have a stab at it.
Strategy. That's kind of basic, but if you don't have any strategy with measurements, everything has to have a measurement. Otherwise, you don't know if you're, sounds good. But I think that's really important. And governance.
Stuart Harvey's thrown in a comment on that one, which is executive buy-in and support.
Yeah, go in there. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, listen, Deborah, I've really enjoyed this. I've learned a bunch of stuff, which is great. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I really love doing these sessions because, you know, we learn stuff. We do this stuff all day, every day, and we still learn things when we bring really smart people onto sessions, and really experienced people like Deborah onto sessions like this. So on behalf of everybody on the call, thank you very much for putting the effort into pulling these slides together and then sharing your thoughts with us today. It's been absolutely super. If anybody would like to, you know, what is it they say on the radio? If you've been affected by the issues on today's show, certainly reach out to me, Stuart Easton on LinkedIn. Deborah, do you want people to reach out to you, or?
Sure, I'm out there.
Brilliant, excellent. All right, you heard it here, folks. So do reach out and connect, ask questions. There's a whole bunch of information on a lot of the things that Deborah talked about today, around prioritization and alignment, increasingly around, you know, resource planning, and, you know, we didn't talk a lot about that today, but that's part of it, and then the benefit tracking throughout the life cycle and all that kind of good stuff. So there's lots of information on our website, and there's more and more and more to come. And I think some of the future content will be based on today's talk. So really good, super stuff. Thank you, Deborah.